Tonight, we once again dive deep into the universe of Metroid without the need of a controller or a power-up. But first, if you enjoy this cozy tale, please don't forget to unleash a super missile on that like button, or make it a power bomb and hit the notification bell as well. It helps others discover the channel and join our ranks of weary dreamers. And please share your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear your suggestions for future content. But for now, get cozy and enjoy tonight's expedition into the mysterious world of Metroid. The wind on Calypsis 4 did not howl, it sang. It was a dry, sibilant sound, like 1,000 serpents moving through a bed of dried leaves, created by the endless friction of air currents dragging over miles of crystallized salt. Amidst the auditory hostility of the wastes, a solitary figure stood immovable, a vibrant anomaly against the monochrome void. Samus Aran remained motionless in the center of a blinding white expanse, her silhouette as sharp and dangerous as a loaded weapon. Her Varia suit, a technological marvel gifted by the Chozo, gleamed dully in the dim light. Its bulky spherical pauldrons and the complex layering of orange and red plating emphasized the powerful athletic frame beneath. Through the T-shaped visor of her helmet, a piercing green glow illuminated the dust motes dancing in the air, scanning the terrain with the cold precision of a predator, assessing its hunting grounds. Above the flats, the local star burned with the feverish desperation of a dying cycle. A bloated orange giant loomed low on the jagged horizon, casting its sickly amber glow across the barren land. The wind wailed melodiously through a web of calcified spires, remnants of a once vibrant coral reef, infusing the air with a haunting resonance. The ocean that had cradled life here was long gone, evaporated millennia ago by a forgotten solar fever, leaving nothing but this stark, skeletal geography to endure the relentless passage of time. Samus shifted her weight, the servo motors in her boots adjusting instantly to the crunching terrain. She took a slow, measured breath, the sound amplified softly within the acoustic chamber of her helmet. It was the only organic sound for miles. In the corner of her vision, the heads-up display flickered with environmental readouts, dismissing the toxic particulate count as irrelevant to her internal systems. The suit's air recyclers hummed a low, soothing delta wave, tirelessly scrubbing the atmosphere of the harsh salinity outside, maintaining a pocket of habitable defiance in a world eager to strip the moisture from her lungs. Samus looked down at the corpse at her feet. It was a space pirate, a scout. The creature was practically mummified, its carapace bleached white by the exposure, twisted into a shape of agony. It hadn't been shot. It had been consumed, leaving only a dry husk in its wake. Samus twitched her right hand. With a soft series of whirs and clanks, the sleek metallic geometry of her arm cannon unlocked. The plate slid backward, retracting up her forearm like the carapace of a beetle folding its wings. The green muzzle light died out, and the heavy machinery compacted until her hand was revealed, encased in the flexible blue polymer of her power suit's glove. She knelt, her movements fluid and silent. She reached out, running a gloved finger along the pirate's chest plate. Dry, brittle. She pressed harder, and the chitin cracked with the sound of breaking porcelain. There was no moisture left in the body, no blood, just dust. It had been drained of life by the only creature capable of such an attack, a Metroid. The thought was a cold drop of water in her mind. The intelligence reports were correct. Commander Bohr, a splinter cell tactician of the Space Pirate High Command, had brought specimens here. But to find a body this drained suggested he was not merely transporting them, he was weaponizing their hunger. Samus stood. The horizon shimmered with heat haze. Ahead, the salt plains gave way to a towering formation of petrified coral, a fortress of dead stone that spiraled toward the sky like a twisting drill. Her scans picked up a faint energy signature emanating from within. It was a rhythmic pulse, like a slow heartbeat. She flexed her right hand again. A series of mechanical whirs and hisses emanated from her suit as the machinery on her forearm sprang to life. The heavy barrel of the arm cannon slid forward, encasing her hand. Inside the mechanism, her fingers found the familiar, ergonomic grip of the trigger assembly. The muzzle flared with a soft, anticipatory neon glow. She began to walk. The salt crunched satisfyingly beneath her boots, the sound breaking the relentless song of the wind. The entrance to the coral fortress was a jagged maw, a natural fissure widened by kinetic blasting. The darkness inside was absolute, a stark contrast to the blinding exterior. Samus stepped across the threshold. Her visor adjusted instantly, painting the interior in shifting topographical lines of green and amber. The walls were lined with the fossilized remains of ancient sea life. Giant nautiloids and spiraling shells fused into the stone. It felt like walking into the throat of a dead god. She moved with practiced caution, the low hum of her morph ball drive idling in her chest plate. The silence here was heavy, pressing against her shields. Ah, the legendary Samus Aran. The voice did not come from a speaker. It resonated through the walls, a synthesized projection that vibrated in her teeth. You are predictable, efficient, but predictable. Samus paused with a hint of surprise. She raised her cannon, scanning the vaulted ceiling of the atrium. 4, she whispered. Gravity suddenly shifted on its head. It wasn't a gradual tilt. It was a violent, slam-force negation. A kinetic trap, buried beneath the floor plates, detonated a pulse of artificial gravity. Samus was wrenched from her feet and slammed against the far wall of the chamber. The impact rang through her suit, flashing red warnings across her HUD. She struggled, her servos whining against the invisible weight pinning her to the stone. It felt as though the planet itself were pressing a thumb against her chest. From the shadows of the upper gallery, a figure emerged. Commander Bohr was tall, his biomechanical form elongated and skeletal, draped in tattered ceremonial rags that trailed behind him. He did not carry a weapon. His 4 arms were clasped behind his back. The Chozo built this world to hide their shame, Bohr said, his voice smooth, lacking the guttural chittering of his kin. I intend to use it to feed our future. He gestured with a lower hand, hovered out of the dark, suspended on magnetic rails. It drifted down to eye level with Samus. The glass fogged, then cleared. Inside floated a Metroid, but it was small, a juvenile, its nuclei pulsing with a frantic, starving speed. A simple lock requires a simple key, Vor mused, but the machine I have found, it requires a battery with unique potency. The containment pod hissed open. Samus gritted her teeth, straining against the gravity tether, pushing her cannon forward. Lock on. Fire. But nothing happened. The kinetic field pinned the firing mechanism internal to the barrel. She couldn't depress the trigger. The Metroid screeched, a high, piercing sound that scratched against the psyche. It lunged. It struck Samus squarely on the chest. The mandibles dug into the Varia suit, finding the energized mesh beneath the armor plating. Usually, the suit's energy shielding would repel the creature for a time, but Vor had tuned the kinetic trap to disrupt her shield harmonics. The Metroid sank its tentacles deep as it drank greedily. The drain was immediate and visceral. Samus gasped in pain, her back arching against the stone wall. It didn't feel like bleeding. It felt like freezing. It felt like her soul was being siphoned through a straw. Her heads-up display flickered violently, energy tanks depleting in seconds. 99, 60, 30. Yes, Vor observed, watching the data stream on his gauntlet. The hybridization, the Chozo blood, the Metroid DNA within you. It creates a resonant frequency unlike anything in the galaxy. The Metroid swelled, its translucent membrane turning from a sickly green to a blinding molten gold. It was gorging on the duality of her nature. Samus's vision grayed. The strength left her limbs. The roar of her suit's reactor faded to a pathetic whine. The cannon on her arm felt impossibly heavy, a dead weight. That will suffice, Vor barked, his voice distorted by the comms, but carrying an imperious edge that cut through the static clouding Samus's mind. He didn't simply call the beast off. He punished it. Vor twisted his wrist, and the heavy mechanical gauntlet encompassing his forearm sparked with a cruel crimson discharge. A neural shockwave rippled from the device, an invisible whip cracking against the Metroid's sensory ganglia. It was a mechanism of pain, a brutal, assertive force designed to override the creature's insatiable instinct to feed. The parasite convulsed, shrieking in protest before the agony forced it to obey. The terrible weight vanished from Samus's chest as the Metroid retracted its tentacles, the hooks sliding out of her depleted armor with a sickening, metallic scrape. Vor keyed a command into his bracer, activating a magnetic tether. Bloated and sluggish, the organism drifted backward, drawn by the recall beam. It was unrecognizable from the agile hunter it had been moments ago. Now, it was distended to the size of an atmospheric probe. The translucent membrane stretched tight over a core of blinding molten gold. It pulsed rhythmically, radiating heat like a miniature captured star, bobbing through the air with a lethargic, drunken sway as it returned to its master, heavy with the stolen essence of the Chozo. Samus slumped to the floor, the gravity trap deactivating now that she was no longer a threat. She couldn't stand. Her breath came in shallow, ragged hitches. Her suit was dark, save for the dimmest reserve light on her chest. "You are empty, Hunter," Vor said, turning away. the golden Metroid floating beside him. Your energy will jumpstart the ether siphon. You have served the pirates well. He raised a hand, and energetic explosives rigged to the tunnel entrance detonated shortly after he crossed the threshold. The ceiling of the entryway collapsed. Tons of petrified coral and rock crashed down, sealing the exit with a final dusty boom. Vor was gone. The light was gone. The weight of debris pressed down against Samus. The silence returned, absolute and suffocating. Darkness. Not just the absence of light, but the presence of weight. Samus lay on the cold stone floor. Her suit was dormant. The silence of the sealed chamber was so profound she could hear the fluid moving in her own inner ear, the slow, labored thump of her heart. Reboot sequence initiated. The text scrolled across her visor in low-resolution amber, devoid of the usual crisp blue interface. Main reactor, offline. Shielding, offline. Weapon systems, critical. Defensive systems, critical. Energy reserves, 0.5/99. Low power mode activated. She grunted in response to the harsh news on the readout and tried to move her arm. It responded with a sluggish whine of unpowered servos. She was heavy. Without the suit's power assist musculature, the armor was a burden, a cage of heavy metal. She forced herself up, grunting with the effort. "Status," she murmured. Her voice was dry, cracking. The suit didn't speak back. The AI voice synthesis was offline to conserve power. Just a blinking amber prompt. Charge suit's core immediately. Samus activated the toggle in her gloved hand, manually overriding the cannon's lock. The machinery retracted with a jagged grinding noise, exposing her hand. She needed the dexterity. She couldn't afford the energy cost of the beam weapon. She stood, swaying. The collapsed entrance was impassable. Her only option was deeper into the complex. She switched her visor to low-light amplification. The world turned into a grainy, monochromatic tunnel. She began to descend. The architecture changed as she went deeper. The natural fossil formations gave way to crude, brutalist space pirate drilling equipment. Massive bores sat silent in the dark, abandoned. Something scuttled in the shadows. Samus froze. Her motion tracker was a dead circle in the corner of her HUD. She had to rely on her eyes and ears. A scrabbler, a local scavenger, heavily armored and usually a minor nuisance, emerged from a vent. In her prime, a single uncharged shot would have vaporized it. Now, it looked like a tank. It hissed, sensing her weakness. It charged. Samus didn't fire. She didn't have the energy. She waited, her muscles tensed beneath the heavy suit. At the last second, she sidestepped, the heavy tread of her boot screeching on the stone. The scrabbler slammed into the wall. Samus lunged with effort. She grabbed the creature by its dorsal spine with her left hand and drove her right, covered in the hard polymer glove, into its soft underbelly. It was a brutal, physical kill. She felt the creature twitch and die in her grip. She ripped a glowing organ, an energy nodule, from its carapace and pressed it against her suit's absorption port. Energy 15/99. A tiny sip of water in the desert, but it was enough to smooth the jagged edges of her vision. "Vor," she whispered again. The name was a motivating mantra. She moved deeper, descending into the throat of the planet. Hours passed, stretching like days. Time was difficult to track in the dark. Samus had scavenged her way down, fighting desperate close-quarters skirmishes with the subterranean fauna. She felt more like a wild animal than a bounty hunter, conserving every calorie, every joule of energy. The air began to change. The dry chill of the upper levels was replaced by a thick, oppressive warmth. She stepped out onto a gantry overlooking a massive, hollowed-out cavern. The view was terrifying. Below her lay the planetary core interface. The space pirates had drilled all the way down to the mantle. Rivers of magma flowed in intricate, man-made canals, feeding into a central spire that pulsed with a dark, violet light, the Chozo ether siphon. But between her and the siphon was the boiler zone. The air shimmered with distortion. It wasn't just hot. It was an inferno. Samus stepped forward. Warning: environmental hazard. The suit's alarm was a weak chirp. The temperature gauge spiked instantly into the red. Her energy count began to tick down. 14, 13. She stumbled back, the heat washing over her like a wave. Her standard Varia functionality, usually capable of withstanding extreme temperatures, was compromised by the low power levels. The cooling loops couldn't cycle fast enough. Vor had passed this way. She could see the scorched footprints on the metal plating of the bridge. She scanned the doorframe leading to the bridge. Scan complete. Thermal shield generator. Status: destroyed. Vor had used a heavy industrial shield to cross the magma field, then sabotaged the emitter behind him. He had locked the door and thrown away the key. Samus slumped against the doorframe, watching the heat distortion shimmer. She was trapped. She couldn't cross without melting inside her suit. She looked around the gantry. To her left, the pirate excavation had breached an ancient natural cavern. The rock there was different, obsidian and pumice. She initiated a deep scan of the surrounding geology, pushing her sensor array to its limit. Object detected. Fossilized remains. Species: magmath. Analysis: species thrived in submagma environments. Carapace contains an enzyme capable of endothermic reaction, absorbing heat to create cellular stasis. The scan highlighted a winding, treacherous path leading away from the siphon into a dark, jagged side cavern labeled the Hollow of Cinders. If she could find a preserved sample of that enzyme, her suit's fabricator could synthesize a biological layer to supplement her failing thermal dampers. She looked at her hand. The glove was scarred, the blue polymer stained with the fluids of the creatures she had killed to survive. She reformed the cannon. It felt heavier than ever, but she needed it ready. Samus turned her back on the siphon and the burning heat. She stepped into the darkness of the cinders. The hunt was not over. It had just changed, becoming exceedingly more complicated. The hollow of cinders was not silent in the way the salt flats were silent. The flats were dead. The hollow was sleeping. Samus moved through a world painted in shades of charcoal and bruised violet. The air here was thick with suspended particulate, ash from the planetary core that had drifted into this cul-de-sac and settled over millions of years. It cushioned her footsteps, turning the heavy metallic tread of her boots into soft, dull thuds. She kept her arm cannon retracted, her right hand free to stabilize herself against the rough, pumice walls. The rock was warm to the touch, vibrating with the distant tectonic churning of the mantle. Energy, 12 out of 99. She was critically low. A direct confrontation would be fatal. Ahead, the tunnel widened into a vast, spherical cavern. In the center, rising from a lake of cooling, black glass, were the ribs. They were titanic, curved arches of fossilized bone belonging to the magmoth, the lava whales that had once swum through the planet's veins. They jutted from the ash like the ruins of a cathedral. Samus activated her scan visor. The low-light amplification painted the room in grainy greens. Movement detected. She froze. Clinging to the ceiling, hanging like stalactites, were the ash geists. They were pale, blind abominations, descendants of surface predators that had evolved in the dark. They had no eyes, only flared, wet nostrils and enormous, bat-like ears that twitched independently, scanning the silence. They hunted by sound. The hum of a beam weapon, the whine of a servo, the crunch of boots on the glassy floor. Any of it would bring the entire colony down upon her. Samus crouched. She had to reach the central ribcage. That was where the marrow, the enzyme-rich fossilized tissue, would be preserved. She moved with agonizing slowness. She controlled her breathing, forcing her heart rate down until the biomonitor in her heads-up display flatlined to a resting crawl. She became a ghost in the machine. She stepped onto the lake of black glass. It was slick. She slipped, her boot scraping the surface. Above, a geist shrieked, a sound like tearing metal. 3 of them dropped from the ceiling, their wings catching the air silently, spiraling down toward the sound. Samus didn't run. Running caused vibration. Instead, she lowered herself into a crouch, making herself small, indistinguishable from the rocks. She watched the creatures land 10 meters away. They were hideous, skeletal things with translucent skin stretched tight over bone. They sniffed the air, heads whipping back and forth, clicking their jaws. One of them crept closer. It was close enough that Samus could see the pulsing blue veins in its neck. She slowly, imperceptibly, raised her right hand. She didn't form the cannon. The mechanical transformation was too loud. She waited, her gloved fingers tensed. The creature lunged, guided by the faint hum of her suit's idle reactor. Samus met it. She didn't strike. She caught it. Her left hand clamped over its snout, silencing the scream, while her right hand found the base of its skull. With a grim, fluid torque, she snapped the neck. The sound was a wet crack, dangerously loud in the quiet. The other 2 geists screamed, launching themselves into the air, confused by the noise but unable to pinpoint the source of the kill. She rolled the corpse under a ledge and stayed perfectly still. The minutes stretched out, heavy and suffocating. Eventually, the geists chittered and returned to the ceiling, assuming the noise was settling rock. Samus let out a breath she had been holding for what felt like minutes. She crept forward, reaching the base of the great ribcage. The marrow was there, encased in the petrified amber of the magmoth's spine was a pocket of preserved biological slurry. Samus placed her gloved hand against the amber. She activated a wicked-looking extraction needle from her wrist mount, a tool usually reserved for hacking data ports, now repurposed for grave robbing. She drove the needle into the fossil. The suit's analysis computer woke up, scrolling text across her visor. Organic compound detected. Endothermic enzyme. Compatibility high. Synthesis required. "Do it," she whispered. The extraction was visceral. The suit drew the amber fluid up through the needle, channeling it through the external tubing of her arm. Samus gritted her teeth. This wasn't a clean software update. This was field surgery. She felt the suit inject the modified compound into the gel layer that sat between her skin and the armor. It burned cold, like liquid nitrogen coursing through her veins. She gasped, her back arching, her vision flashing white. The Varia suit was rewriting its own thermal regulation protocols, bonding the alien history of this dead planet with the Chozo technology. Synthesis complete. Upgrade acquired. Thermal membrane. Samus looked at her arms. The orange, heavy plating of the Varia suit didn't change shape, but a shimmering, oily sheen now coated the metal, refracting the light. It looked wet, organic, and resilient. She stood. The pain faded, replaced by a dull, throbbing energy. She had what she needed. She retraced her steps, moving past the sleeping geists with a new confidence. The cold burn of the enzymes made her feel detached, insulated from the world. She reached the gantry of the boiler zone. The heat wall was still there, shimmering with deadly intensity. The air temperature read 400 degrees and climbing. Samus didn't hesitate. She stepped off the cool stone and onto the metal bridge. The roar of the heat hit her, but the burning didn't follow. The thermal membrane flared, the oily sheen rippling as it absorbed the thermal energy, converting the lethal heat into harmless luminescence. She was walking inside a bubble of cool air. She marched across the bridge, the magma flowing in rivers of fire beneath her feet. The door to the siphon core loomed ahead. She flexed her right hand. The arm cannon slid into place, locking over her hand with its familiar mechanical clatter. The barrel extended. For the first time since the ambush, the charge shot began to cycle, a low rhythmic whine that promised violence. She was empty no longer. She was adapting. The core chamber was a cathedral of noise. The ether siphon was fully active. A colossal spire of Chozo gold and violet pumped into the ceiling of the cavern, vibrating with such intensity that the air itself felt jagged. It was drinking the planet dry, pulling the geothermal life force up from the mantle. And suspended in the center of the machine, held in a stasis field of crackling energy, was the baby Metroid. It was no longer small. It had swollen to the size of a gunship's cockpit, its membrane distended and pulsing with a blinding golden light. It was screaming, a psychic shriek that tore at Samus's mind. Vor stood at the control console, his back to her. He was interfaced directly with the machine, cables drilled into his spine. "You persist," Vor said. His voice was distorted, amplified by the siphon's resonance. He turned. His body was shedding flakes of armor. The energy output of the machine was slowly disintegrating him, but he didn't seem to care. He was drunk on the power. "I found a way to walk through fire, Vor," Samus said. Her voice was calm, amplified by her helmet, cutting through the mechanical roar. "Then you shall burn in a different fire." Vor severed his connection to the console. He raised his forearms, and the siphon's exhaust vents flared. He channeled the raw planetary energy into plasma bolts, firing a barrage of blinding violet light. Samus dashed. She moved with a fluidity that defied the bulk of her suit. She slid beneath the first volley, the heat washing harmlessly over her new membrane. She came up firing, short, controlled bursts of her beam. The shots struck Vor's shield, rippling against the energy barrier. He laughed, a dry, clicking sound. He gestured, and the floor plates shifted, rising and falling like a mechanical sea. Samus leapt, grappling to a suspended vent. She swung, firing a missile at Vor's feet. The explosion knocked him back, but his shield held. "The Metroid is almost spent," Vor roared. "And when it dies, this planet dies with it." He slammed his fist onto a remote trigger. The containment field around the Metroid spiked. The creature convulsed. Vor was drawing the last dregs of energy from it to power a final, sector-wiping blast. Samus dropped from the ceiling, landing in a crouch. Her energy was critically low again. The fight, the movement, the shield absorption, it was draining her reserves. She panted, her tank warning flashing red. 0504. Vor towered over her. "A battery," he sneered. "Just like you." He aimed a disruptor cannon at her head. The Metroid screeched. It wasn't a sound of pain this time. It was a sound of recognition. Through the golden haze of its containment, the creature saw Samus. It sensed the genetic echo, the Choso, the Metroid, the Mother. The containment field shattered. It didn't break outward. It imploded. The Metroid, defying the physics of the machine, phased through the glass. It didn't attack Vor. It flew, a streak of golden light, straight at Samus. Vor fired. The shot missed as the Metroid slammed into Samus. She flinched, expecting the drain, expecting death. Instead, she felt a rejuvenation. The Metroid latched onto her chest plates, but it reversed its polarity. The golden energy it had stolen, the energy amplified by the siphon, came flooding back into her suit. It was a torrent of raw power, warm and limitless. Energy restored, 100% reserves, maximum, hyperstate, active. Samus stood, rejuvenated, determined. Her suit was glowing, wreathed in a rainbow aura of pure energy. The arm cannon hummed with a pitch so high it was nearly silent. The Metroid detached, hovering protectively over her shoulder, chirping weakly. It had given her everything it had. She locked eyes with Vor. The space pirate took a step back, fear finally registering in his gaze. "Impossible," he hissed. Samus raised her cannon. The barrel split open, venting excess heat. The charge that gathered at the muzzle was not a beam, it was a star. She offered no final ultimatum, no witty retort to hiss back into the face of the pirate. The time for words had evaporated with the containment field. Inside her helmet, her eyes narrowed, cold and focused behind the tactical data streaming across her visor. She squeezed the trigger mechanism. The hyperbeam didn't just fire, it erupted, a chaotic, screaming ribbon of oscillating rainbow energy tore through the stagnant air of the chamber, bridging the gap between hunter and prey in a fraction of a heartbeat. The sound was deafening, a high-frequency shriek that threatened to crack the very walls of the laboratory. Vor raised a claw, perhaps to shield his eyes, or perhaps in a futile attempt to summon a defense. But the magnitude of the energy made the gesture meaningless. The beam struck. His personal shielding flared violently for a millisecond before shattering like brittle ice under a sledgehammer. There was no resistance to a power of this magnitude. The torrent of hyper-accelerated particles slammed into his carapace, vaporizing the heavy plating and the organic matter beneath in the same breath. He didn't even have time to scream. The blinding white wrath of the energy consumed his silhouette entirely, erasing him from existence atom by atom. The onslaught didn't end with the pirate. The beam punched through the space where Vor had stood, unyielding, and slammed into the siphon controls behind him. The ancient Chozo machine, perverted by pirate technology, let out a metallic groan that vibrated through the floor plates. Gold casing turned to liquid slag, dripping like wax, while the violet containment lights exploded in showers of sparks and glass. The entire central spire, severed from its moorings by the relentless stream of power, began to tilt. It listed slowly at first, then gathered speed, sliding majestically from its pedestal. It crashed down, plunging into the searing magma flow far below, dragging the scattered, vaporized remnants of Vor down into the planet's burning core. The detonation of the siphon rocked the very foundations of the world, sending tremors rippling through the bedrock that threatened to bring the cavern ceiling down. Dust and pulverized rock rained from above, coating the magma-lit chamber in a grey haze. But then, as quickly as the violence had begun, the silence rushed back in to fill the void. The deafening roar of the machine died away. The mechanical heartbeat of the facility stilled, and the violent shaking subsided into a stillness that felt heavy, almost suffocating. Samus stood amidst the twisted wreckage, her boots locked magnetically to the precarious floor plates. The blinding prismatic energy that had surged through her armor flickered and died. The rainbow aura faded from her suit, the volatility dissipating into the air as her systems cycled down, venturing back within safe operating parameters. Her plating settled back into its standard, battle-worn hues of metallic orange and crimson, the Varia suit cooling rapidly in the aftermath of the discharge. She looked up, her green visor scanning the gloom. Hovering weakly near the soot-stained ceiling was the Metroid. The radiant golden glow that had signified its supercharged state was gone, extinguished along with the pirate warlord. It was translucent again, a pale, membranous green, pulsing with a rhythm that was dangerously slow. It drifted without purpose, starving, empty, and adrift in the sudden quiet. Samus deactivated her weapon systems. With a series of mechanical clicks and the whine of servo motors, the plating of her arm cannon shifted, retracting and folding inward until the lethal barrel was replaced by her articulated gauntlet. She reached up with both hands, cupping them toward the drifting creature. The Metroid descended, lacking the energy to maintain its altitude, and landed softly in her gloved palms. Through the sensors in her fingertips, she registered the texture. It was cold to the touch, gelatinous and fragile. It quivered against her composite armor, its nuclei dim and cloudy. She stared at it, the creature reflected in the curve of her visor. It was a monster, a biological weapon engineered by the Chozo's hubris and the pirates' greed, a predator designed to strip entire planets of their life force. By all rights, her mission parameters dictated its extermination. But it had saved her. In the crucial moment, it had chosen alliance over hunger. "Rest," she murmured, her voice filtered and low within the helmet. Samus turned from the ruin of the siphon and walked the long way up, navigating the treacherous, crumbling ascents of the spelunker platforms. She carried the creature cradled against her chest like an injured child, shielding it from the falling debris and the lingering heat of the vents. It took nearly an hour to navigate the labyrinthine tunnels, but she eventually located the aquifer she had scanned during her infiltration, a deep, subterranean vaulted chamber that the mining drills had miraculously missed. The air here was different. The acrid smell of ozone and sulfur faded, replaced by the scent of damp stone and minerals. The water in the natural basin was dark and cool, fed by deep springs, untouched by the corruption of the siphon or the searing heat of the core. Patches of biophosphorescent fungi clung to the jagged walls, casting a gentle, starlight glow of teal and violet across the glassy surface of the water. Samus stepped to the edge of the pool, her heavy footsteps echoing softly. She knelt, the suit's hydraulics whining in protest after the long battle. She lowered her hands into the water, breaking the stillness. The Metroid sensed the change in medium immediately. Its membrane rippled, reacting to the mineral-rich fluid. It detached from the rough grip of her gloves, slipping into the cool, dark water with a grace it lacked in the air. It pulsed once, a soft, bioluminescent green light returning to its core, and then dived. It spun in the water, agitated at first, confused by the freedom, before the instinct took over. It calmed, realizing it was no longer being siphoned or hunted. It found a cluster of bioluminescent kelp swaying in the depths and nestled into it, its insatiable hunger going dormant in the isolation. It would survive here. It was trapped in the dark, feeding on the blind, cave-dwelling fish, miles beneath the surface and harmless to the galaxy above. It was a ghost in a bottle, a secret buried in the heart of a dead world. Samus watched it for a long moment, checking her readings one last time. The water reflected her visor, an emerald gaze staring back from the dark, solitary and inscrutable. She stood, water dripping from her gauntlets, and turned away. The ascent to the surface was a lonely trek through archaic ventilation shafts and lift tubes. Samus finally breached the surface, reaching her gunship just as the twin moons of Calypsis 4 rose over the crystalline salt flats. The wind was still hissing, the eternal serpent of the dunes carving new patterns into the endless white wasteland. She boarded the ship, the ramp retracting with a heavy clank behind her. The cockpit sealed with a pressurized hiss, shutting out the dry, dead world and the howling gale. Her environment stabilized, the hum of the life support systems a welcome familiarity. Her hands moved over the controls, habitual and precise, flipping toggles and engaging the pre-flight sequence. The repulsor engines fired, blasting blue flame against the white salt, scorching the ground one last time. The ship lifted, dust swirling in its wake, banking hard toward the upper atmosphere. Gravity pressed her into the pilot's seat, a reassuring weight as she broke the planet's hold. Samus looked at the rear monitor. The planet below receded, turning into a scarred white marble, silent and empty against the backdrop of space. She thought of the spark of life drifting in the dark water deep below the crust, a singular anomaly in a tomb. She engaged the main thrusters, the powerful hum echoing in the cockpit, a solitary symphony in the vastness of space. The stars outside the viewport stretched into infinite lines of white light, blurring the cosmos into a tunnel of speed, a reminder of how distant she felt from the warmth of connection. With each pulse of the engine, the silence of the void wrapped around her like an old cloak, both familiar and suffocating. In this endless expanse, she was the hunter forever chasing threats, embracing her solitude as a necessary burden, a solitary guardian of the galaxy against the darkness that sought to consume it. A role that Samus Aran would continue until her last breath.